Hello, welcome to Imbalancing the Spectrum. I am your host, Jose, and for today's topic, I actually was thinking about talking about childhood trauma and generational trauma, but before we even touch those topics, even the slightest bit, I thought that it'd be better to talk about shame and guilt. So, to start off, let's start with the definition of each one. I know that a lot of people do confuse shame and guilt. I know I did for the longest time, um, because shame and guilt, they feel kind of similar to one another. Physically speaking, you feel the same symptoms. But when I went to therapy, my therapist actually helped me define define and separate these two terms. So I struggled a lot with the definition and the feeling of guilt and shame because uh, in Spanish, shame is vergüenza. Vergüenza can also mean embarrassed. And guilt, even though the translation is different, in Spanish, it's culpa. But in context, people use it kind of interchangeably, guilt and shame. Like, if you're scolding a child, look what you did, you should feel guilty. They interchange it in Spanish, say, look at what you did, mira lo que hiciste, te debería de dar vergüenza. You should feel ashamed. You should feel embarrassed. And this is actually why for the longest time my brain didn't know how to differentiate between these words. But my therapist helped me out, and now I know that shame is a defense mechanism to keep ourselves from harm, whatever that harm may be. Um, while guilt is a feeling that you get when you know you did something wrong. So shame is feeling bad about ourselves as a person, and guilt is feeling bad about our actions, something that we did. So the way these feelings get interchanged a lot and people don't know how to differentiate them is exactly because of that. If you're being told repeatedly that you're doing something wrong and you should feel embarrassed or ashamed, innately you feel guilty. And the more it gets repeated, the more it sinks in. And usually with shame, we blame ourselves to justify some sort of situation that is not entirely our fault or not at all. Um, Sometimes we do this in a certain event, a certain situation that we can't overstand or we're afraid to overstand it. This is why it's a defense mechanism. You're trying to protect yourself from something that your mind in that moment doesn't completely understand it or subconsciously does not want to face it. Shame brutally disregards our self awareness. Now, this is where people get confused as well. Self aware is understanding our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, while self conscious, this is what they confuse it for, is being hyper focused on how other people perceive us. Therefore, we end up feeling bad about ourselves as a person, and we perceive ourselves as failures, or we feel unacceptable to society, to our family, to others. And more than likely, it leads to low self esteem. And like I said, guilt is feeling bad about your actions, something you did. This takes accountability when you feel guilty. That's the first step of accountability. It's feeling guilty about something you did, something you know was wrong. So that's the first step for guilt. It's the accountability part, feeling guilty. A lot of the times, we're told that we can't do anything right or we won't amount to anything, or simply brutally told that we're not worth the space we inhabit. And that's the direct approach. But shame can also come from an indirect approach. More often than not, we're put down in childhood by family or those around us. This sinks into our brain, and we truly believe it. Like I said previously, when you're a kid, you believe what you're told. You're looking for guidance, and if somebody tells you that Santa exists, you're gonna believe it, and you only believe it because you were told he exists. If you're told that the devil's gonna get you, you're gonna believe that as well because you're looking for guidance. So you don't know what the world actually is. And this is where people adopt different behaviors as they're growing up. You can become submissive, completely submissive, not just with your family, but in social situations as well. Or you can become submissive at home and what would be the right word here? Because it's not dominant. It's, what is this word? Damn it. You rebel. You become a rebel in the outside world. When you become a rebel in the outside world, you take out all that anger that you submit to at home and you put it onto others. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience. In my experience, I was made to be submissive. I had to listened to not just my parents, but every adult I ever met. I was led to believe that I had to be obedient, be obedient to my elders, be respectful. Later, I learned that respect is earned, it's not given. What the hell? Oh my god, no way, yeah. I'll repeat that again. Respect is not given, it's earned. It took me a long time to learn this. As a kid, I was led to believe that you had to give respect and not expect it back. So, with that in mind, I had no respect for myself because I was not given respect. For the longest time, I actually thought I didn't deserve respect. I could go deep into my childhood, but it's still too early for that. So that'll be another time when we take a deep dive into what my childhood was like. But in regards to today's topic, um, as a kid growing up, I was told repeatedly, and I would hear comments. When you're told repeatedly, that's the direct approach I was talking about. When you hear comments, that's indirect, or even just certain actions. But for me, I was told I was chunky, fat, I needed to lose weight. And I'm talking at the age of 7 to 13 years old. Like, you're telling a kid they're fat. They haven't even gone through puberty yet. When puberty hits, it affects a lot of your body, mentally and physically, emotionally as well. But when you're prepubescent, uh, those things don't affect you so much yet. So a little kid being told he's chunky and he needs to go on a diet, well, it makes that kid, me, I felt like there was something wrong with me because I was chunky. Now I realize it was natural. In my family, we have a lot of big people, and genetically, well, it passes down. So now I ask myself, why would they tell me to go on a diet and to lose weight when they had more weight at the time than the average adult, to my knowledge at that time? My answer for that is they deflected their own insecurities onto me, and that's part of the generational trauma that becomes my childhood trauma. So their own insecurities, they projected them on to me, and it made me feel shitty. I felt like no one liked me because of my shape. It wasn't until I was 13 going on 14, summer break before high school, I started looking up videos and blogs and articles about how to lose weight. And this is a 13-year-old mind uh, looking for answers because I wasn't getting them. They weren't guiding me to lose weight. They were just telling me to lose weight. So after all these articles and videos, I started, um, when I made sunny side up eggs, I would put a napkin over those eggs and take the excess grease away from it. And if we had a family meal, I would do the same thing because my family would cook with a lot of grease, a lot of oil. And when I started doing that, the first time was, "What are you going on about?" That's what they told me. "What are you going on about now?" Um, and I told them I'm going on a diet. And they said, "Well, the way you eat, it's not going to work." And my teen brain was like, "Wait, what? What do you mean it's not going to work? You've told me to go on a diet for a long time, and now you're telling me it's not going to work?" So what I did was degrease my food. I would take away the excess grease, and by the time it was time for me to enroll into high school, I had lost a lot of weight. I wasn't perfectly skinny, but compared to the shape that I was, I did lose weight. And when I say I lost a lot of weight, I'm still thinking in that 13-year-old mind. That 13-year-old thought it was a lot of weight. Really, it was like 10, 15 pounds. And for a 13-year-old, maybe that extra fat was actually good for me, and I got rid of it. But really, I got rid of the bad fat, the one that causes cholesterol and different illnesses, because that's what we cooked with. So when I'm in high school, I'm losing weight, and I remember the highest weight I was 180, and that was before um, doing all this extra stuff to consume less fat. So 180. Let's just say that at 13, I was 180. By the time I was 14, I was one, and when I just turned 14, I was 175. And in that first month of school, I remember losing another 5 pounds. So 170. Next month, I lost a little bit more, to the point where my natural weight throughout high school was 150 to 160. And I wasn't fat, but because I was told I was fat, still, while in high school, after losing the weight that was not necessary for me, I was told by my parents that I was fat and that I needed to lose the weight. So it dug deeper in my mind, and I was so self conscious about it because I thought other people perceived me as fat as well. But I would have comments here and there at school like, "You're skinny. How are you so skinny?" And it would make me uncomfortable because in my mind, I didn't think I was skinny. I did struggle with body dysmorphia in my teenage years, um, up until I was like 18, 19 years old. So, ever since I was a kid till I was 19, I did struggle with body dysmorphia. I would look in the mirror, I would take off my shirt, look at myself, and even though I was skinny, because I see pictures of me now and I'm like, bro, you weren't fat at all. You were healthy, and that was your natural weight. But when I looked in the mirror, I hated myself. I had this feeling of disgust with me. And I would take pictures. I didn't like taking pictures. I actually still don't. Well, I don't mind taking pictures. I just don't take them now. But back then, I didn't like taking pictures, whether they were selfies, portraits, um, family pictures. I didn't like it. School pictures. The only school pictures I took during high school, I believe was my sophomore year. After that, I skipped it. I wouldn't go take my pictures. I didn't find it necessary and I didn't want other people to look at me in the yearbook. So, all these feelings of self-hatred actually damaged me a lot to the point that I didn't know I was damaged. I didn't know I was going through trauma and not dealing with it because it was my normal. In high school, by my junior year, I was skinnier and my weight was still 150, 160. But I was skinny. And I had this thing at home where I didn't like taking off my shirt at all. From the from childhood. From childhood until my teenage years, I didn't like taking off my shirt. I didn't like showing skin at all. So I would wear baggy clothes because I thought it would distract people from my actual shape, my distorted shape in my mind. And at home, like I said, most people that I've known, they feel comfortable being shirtless in their own home when there are kids and teenagers. I was not one of them. We would go to the pool. I would not take off my shirt. They would tell me to take off my shirt. I would say no. And um, they would, when I say that, I do mean my parents. So they would call me mamon. Mamon is a Spanish word. I don't think it has an actual translation. I tried to think so hard about that word and how to translate it, but I just couldn't find the words. But basically, it's equivalent to an eye roll. Like, oh my god, dude, really? You're that guy? You're that person? So, they would call me nicknames because I wouldn't do certain things I didn't feel comfortable with. And even that affected me. I felt like I wasn't worth being with my family. That I was a disturbance More than a disturbance, I felt like a bother to my family. And all these feelings of self-hatred, they kind of boiled up inside of me throughout my whole childhood. And throughout my childhood, I did things I'm not proud of. And I'm actually referring to the way I treated one of my brothers. I'm the oldest one out of three. We're all men, but my middle brother, I treated very shitty. I would project my anger towards him, and I was physically violent with him for most part of our childhood. But the reason I was physically violent, I learned that it was actually because my parents, specifically my mom, thought she was teaching us discipline through violence. And they would always tell me I had to be the role model. I had to be the example because I was the older brother. So that would register in my mind and it would translate to, oh, well, my parents taught me through physical violence, so I have to teach my brother through physical violence. A lot of that violence towards my brother was because of that reason, but a lot of it was also because of my own anger I didn't even know I had. It was anger towards me and anger towards the world because I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was worth fitting in. So I excluded myself from the world. In family gatherings, I would just sit and not really interact with people. If there were kids my age, I would try and go with them, see what I could do with them. But mm, more often than not, I would end up excluding myself and tell myself that they were the ones that didn't want to hang out with me. Um, this came from my self doubt, and I always thought myself as the weird one, not the normal one. But now I know better. Now I know that there is no such thing as normal, and that my value is my own. I know my worth. And that came from unlearning so many things about my childhood and my teenage years. And in my early 20s was when I started making those connections that I actually was or am worth something. But I say was as in I was worth something the whole time and didn't realize it. My big eye opener was when I was supposedly going out with this guy. So I went out with him. We hung out for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, he met my friends. We went to cookouts and parties together with my friends. But something was off. He wanted, he didn't want me to go to the bar that he usually hung out at. He didn't want me to meet his circle of friends, and it bothered me. So I told him, and well, actually, before I told him, he came over. I made dinner for him, and he didn't want to eat the dinner. He wanted to have sex, and I said no. Like, I want to get to know you before we even take further steps. And he got angry, and he's like, "You're just a tease, and this is why nobody loves you. Nobody will ever love you." And he attacked my health, knowing that my health was a big insecurity of mine at the time. He said that because of my health issues, nobody will ever give me the time of day, and that I was just taking up oxygen from everybody else. This is literally what he said. He said that I was taking up oxygen and that I my value would increase in the trash. So when he left, I was devastated, and not really because he decided to end things with me, but because I actually believed his words. I believed that I was not deserving of love, not deserving of friendships, not deserving of having a life. So I did enter into a state of uncontrollable crying, and I called my friend, which she had been at my house earlier before he even came over. And when I called her, immediately she said, "What's wrong?" And I busted out crying even more. And I told her what happened. She's like, "I'll be on my way." And in the background, while I was on the phone with her, I was playing a song on repeat. It's called "Waste of Time" by Snow the Product, and it was just on repeat. So it took her like 15 minutes to get here, and the song was still playing, and I wasn't expecting her to bring company. She brought her boyfriend, and she brought another friend of ours that she was actually concerned about me, which surprised me. So if you girls are listening, shouts out to you. I know that life happened and we haven't communicated in a while, but I hope both of you are okay. So shouts out to you. So they came over, tried to calm me down. I was unconsolable, and if I remember correctly, I had made coco van shrimp, which is shrimp in coconut cream, and wine. So I was drinking wine. Forget the coconut, the coconut shrimp. I was drinking the wine, and they came over and they took the bottle away from me, and I was like, "No, no," and tried to grasp it back, not realizing it was already empty. And I wasn't drunk, I was just unconsolable. Of course, the wine didn't help, but anyway, when your childhood is experienced by trauma and by negative conversations or negative comments, negative anything that may constantly affect you, that it's constantly around you. It will affect your adult interactions if not resolved. So, this is why I was saying that it was an eye opening night for me because everything that he said, I overanalyzed it and believed it. And afterwards, don't remember how long it took me to realize this, but I had already entered self acceptance before meeting him. But this time around, I started to love myself for who I am, and along the way, discovered things I I had always pushed back. I had always repressed it or suppressed it, and those things started flowing, and I was being more me. The more me I am, the more I love myself, and it's an amazing feeling to have. Yes, I still have my self doubts here and there, but I have to push those thoughts to the back of my mind where they will not be acknowledged. I will not give them the time that they want to take over. But going back to shame, which all of what I just said actually connects to it. So now you know where part of my self doubt, self hatred, dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, and shame came from. That's just a small part of it. There's so much more that contributed to it. But for me, when there was some sort of situation that had nothing to do with me at all, and people being angry at me, blaming me, I used to believe them. And that feeling of shame comes back. It surges back when that happens. And the symptoms when I feel shame for me is like feeling gut punched, feeling like my blood is rushing or boiling, having my heart pounding so fast. I flinch, I look away, or I look down when I'm in front of that person that's making me feel that way. Every person's physical reaction to shame or any other feeling is different and unique to them. Some symptoms that other people can experience is feeling flushed, having a pressure in your chest, feeling tired, feeling nauseous or nauseated, feeling small, which I do experience as well. I feel like I'm that little kid again. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, how do you get through those feelings? What do you do to feel better? If you're experiencing it in the moment, step away, take a breather. Um, Especially if the other person that's making you feel that way is very com- confronting, they're very combative. Just remove yourself from the situation. If you know they're not combative, there is a simple way that you could make your voice feel heard, and it's by talking to them. Hey, what you just said is actually making me feel this way, so could you not talk about me in that manner? And that's a boundary. You're creating a boundary. And of course, it's up to the other person to respect it or not. If they don't respect it, hey, you're not respecting my boundaries. So if you're going to continue to make me feel degraded, make me feel ashamed of myself, I'm not going to associate myself with you any longer. Or I'll associate with you, but if you start making me feel this way, I'm just gonna walk out. Or if you're on the phone, I'm gonna hang up. We can talk again another day. But for me, it has worked. Distancing yourself little by little, walking away, hanging up on the person. But at least in my experience, what I do is, hey, you're making me feel this way. I'm not gonna talk to you, and hang up on them. And when they're combative, talk to me when you can talk like a civilized person. Hang up on them. Now, when it comes to in-home experiences, it's a little tougher because, well, you're at home. If you're able to drive, take a drive, but once you've calmed down, once you don't feel anger, just go take a drive. What I would do is take a walk. Walking calms me down, and it actually distracts me for a little bit. But keep in mind that those are only tools when you're in that moment, when you're feeling shame in that moment. What you have to do to make that shame go away and not constantly be there anymore is tell yourself, I'm not a mistake. I don't fuck things up all the time. I make mistakes. I'm not a mistake. I do belong here in this lifetime. I'm here for a reason, and I want to find out what that reason is. For all I know, personally, maybe this is my reason to talk about my experience. Because that's what I've done my whole life with people that I meet. I talk about my experiences, they resonate with it, and it makes them feel better. And I used to be a big people pleaser. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Don't be a people pleaser, because most people that keep calling you to help them, they really just want to take advantage of your kindness and your empathy. So don't let that happen. Don't be a people pleaser. Not everybody has to like you, and not everybody has to be the center of your attention. Redirect that attention to yourself. First, help yourself before helping somebody else, because the more you help yourself, the more you'll be able to help others when needed. Not when someone asks for it repeatedly. I'm talking about repeatedly asking for favors, repeatedly telling you, hey, can I talk to you because this and this happened? And they repeat the cycle. They make the same mistake again. And you're telling them, you're giving them advice. they don't follow it, they repeat the same mistakes. So you're stuck in a loop. Don't get stuck in a loop. I know I did for a long time. And now I know how to put up boundaries. Do I believe in second chances? Yeah, I do. I know some people don't. But see, the first time you fuck up, you make a mistake, you make me feel a certain way, I'll voice my opinion, I'll voice what I'm feeling, let you know that. If you disregard it, hey, that's on you, go your own way. But if you decide to come back to me and want to reconnect, then I would have to ask, why? Why do you want to reconnect? And if there's some sort of accountability from their part, I'll be like, okay, you deserve a second chance. Now, what accountability is, it's taking responsibility for your actions. People mistake responsibility with accountability. Responsibility is the obligation to do so, and your accountability is the responsibility for your actions, for what you do, for what you say. So if you go up to a person and you say, sorry if I made you feel this way and that way, you're not taking accountability because you're putting that if. You have to validate the other person's feelings into your apology, into your amendment, or not amendment, your amends. You have to incorporate those things so that it's credible and genuine and comes from a real place within you. If you say, sorry, I fucked up and I did this and this to you, and I'm sorry I made you feel abandoned, ashamed, whatever they were feeling, after you acknowledge that that's what they were feeling, that's accountability. But if you repeat the same mistake, it's like, did you actually feel that way? And that's when I start distancing myself. And a lot of people might not agree with me, but I do it slowly. I slowly distance myself because most people will, if you cut them off like that in a snap, uh, to me it's a great way to distance yourself, and only when it's necessary. But if I feel like that person is able to learn or is willing to learn and take accountability little by little, then I'm like, okay, maybe, just maybe, they're learning and they don't. But fuck up a third time, if to me it's no. You can't fuck up the same thing 3 times. Once could have been an accident. Twice shows me that you need to learn more about yourself and others, how to acknowledge other people as well. The third time, it becomes a pattern. Patterns I'm not okay with, negative patterns. So that's why I say I do believe in second chances, but a third time, no. That's when I cut them off completely. Now, if I know the person, let's say I just met somebody and I know of them and what people say about that person, and let's say it's negative things like they steal, they take advantage of people, they are abusive. Well, let me get to another person. If I see it right off the bat that they are that way, okay, well, I'm not even getting close to that person. But if they show me a kinder side, a more genuine side to them, I'll give myself the chance to know them a little bit more. But then if I start seeing these certain patterns or that people were saying about them, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, cutting that person off. And a lot of the times you don't even need to give them an explanation because they know. They know. But as I was saying, what to do to heal that shame within you, it's not going to happen overnight. Like I was saying, acknowledge that you are not a mistake and that your mistakes do not define you. But embrace your mistakes because you learn from them. Tell yourself you belong here for a reason. You have a reason for being here. You truly do. We all do. And of course, the thing that you have to tell yourself, which we all need to learn, because a lot of the times we think otherwise, but we have to tell ourselves, my wounds will heal. I can do the work within myself and heal. And over time, that wound that I helped become a scab, it will scar over time, and as time passes by, that scar will no longer be there. That's when people can completely talk about their negative experiences in life. If you haven't healed, you'll meet the people that can't talk about it. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody has met a person like that. I can't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And that's because they haven't healed. And I used to have this, what I consider a toxic trait for myself, is people that didn't want to talk about certain things and they didn't want to put in the work. I would talk to them and they would resonate with certain things, but I would try to heal them or help them heal themselves rather. But I realized that that was toxic for me because I was putting myself aside, putting them first. And not only that, in a way, I was kind of pushing them to do something that maybe they weren't ready. But when they felt ready later on, after I stopped doing that, um, I learned that when a person is ready, they will talk to you. They will confide in you and they will let you know um, what has happened, what their story is, and how they feel or felt. And that would be their second step to heal. The first one is actually acknowledge that they can heal. So those are some of the things that you could do to help yourself heal from shame. Shame, like I said earlier, it causes low self-esteem. And that low self-esteem, if it marinates over time, it develops or it evolves into low self-worth when you no longer feel worthy of anything. And a lot of people enter into depression because of this. And they truly in their mind believe they're not worth anything. So they enter this depression. And what depression is, it's a vault. You walk into that vault, you close the vault door behind you, it locks, and you don't want to get out of there. You're entrapping yourself into that because you truly believe that in your mind. And the only way to help yourself is to have genuine conversations with yourself. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? How can I get this feeling? Or how can I remove this feeling? Either or. And this feeling, if it's negative, what's the root of it? If it's a happy feeling, a positive feeling, why do I feel that way? And my advice is overanalyze yourself. There's no such thing as overanalyzing yourself. When you analyze yourself, you commune within. You're not only talking to yourself, but you're talking to your brain, you're talking to your spirit. You're talking to your inner essence, for lack of a better term. And that essence, once you have conversations with it, it will heal little by little. And that essence will make you feel better on its own. It's like when the drain is clogged. What do you have to do? Unclog it. If it's really, really clogged, you take out most of what you can. And then let the water run and let it do its job. Let it flow. Let the water flow and carry the grime with it. That's what your essence does. Once it starts flowing, it carries out those negative feelings within you that you've kept for a long time, and it takes them out. When it takes them out, you start seeing things from different perspectives, and this allows you to be more self-aware. Let's remind ourselves. Self-awareness is understanding yourself, your emotions, your thoughts, your behavior, your actions. So the more you understand yourself, the more you're willing to love yourself. Compared to being self-conscious about it all the time, you're really just focused on what other people think of you, what they perceive you as, and what they've led you to think of yourself and perceive yourself as. So when you're in this emotion of constant low self-esteem and low self-worth, there's a way to actually flip it, flip it around, to convert it to self-worth, to start accepting yourself as you are and realize how valuable you are. So if the first thing that comes to mind is I'm so fat, rearrange that. Say I appreciate all that my body can do for me and what it does to keep me alive. I'll appreciate my body more. And maybe this will lead you to find ways, if you want to, find ways, find healthier habits that will lead you to be the person you want to look as, the person you want to represent to the world. But if you're happy in that state, if you realize you're happy in that state, then there's nothing to it. You learn to accept yourself as you are, specifically speaking about your appearance, whether you think you're too fat or you think you're too skinny. Appreciate yourself. One of my favorite movies in the world is Fat Girls with Monique. And this movie, I would rewatch over and over and over and over and over again. Because, and this was in the first time I saw it, I was 13 years old. So from 13 to like 19 years old, I would repeatedly watch that movie over and over. Why? Because in the movie, without trying to not to give any spoilers if you haven't seen it, and it's Fat Girls, PHATGIRLZ. If you haven't watched it, I don't know where you've been because it's a great movie. So, in the movie, it talks about how other people put their own expectations of being skinny or beautiful, pretty, specifically towards women. It's targeted towards women. But by the end of the movie, well, she starts catching feelings for this guy, and he starts showing her affection, and that's when she's like, wait, what the hell is happening? Is this a prank, or is this a dare you want to win? What's going on? That's not what she says, but that's the idea. Like, she couldn't believe that this guy was catching feelings for her. And there's this strong scene where she confronts him and she tells him, I'm fat. Like, nobody will ever love this blob. But towards the end, she learns to accept herself as she is. So that's exactly what I mean. Whether you're skinny, big, consider yourself fat, um, it's all about your perspective. So if you say, I'm so fat or I'm so skinny, tell yourself, I appreciate what my body does for me to keep me alive. Now, if you're morbidly obese, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of those are medical, and some of them are just because we overcompensate our feelings, and a lot of the time it has to do with food. I know I used to do that too. But if you are obese and you are concerned about your health, go to a doctor. Find out what could be happening. And don't feel bad about yourself for being that way. The body was created to be the way it is. Um, I know I say that and it's easy to say that, but when you're in that state of mind, it doesn't matter. So, my advice is first go to a health professional. Um, get tested if you need to. or go to a nutritionist, ask what you could eat that could better your health. But all in all, it's about accepting yourself, rearranging that mental perception of yourself. Like, let's say no one likes me. Well, I like me. I definitely like me. I used to not like me, but I love myself now. So change the narrative in your mind. Change it. If you, and I know I've said this or sorry, I know I've said this before, that nothing ever goes my way and everything goes wrong. So tell yourself, not everything will always go your way, not everything's going to be perfect, but you can try to fluctuate and do things differently so that you could try to get your way, but acknowledge that not everything is going to be perfect. There might be challenges along the way when you fluctuate, making decisions, and that's alright. I know I hear this a lot. What if I fail? But what if you succeed? What if you have a goal and you make it? When you enter that mind space, you push yourself even more because you get excited of finding out what will happen if you succeed. If you enter the mentality of what if I fail, you're not going to find out, or you won't want to find out. So you'll never do it. And a lot of the times we avoid certain things, certain activities, because we're afraid of failing. I say take a risk. I've learned to take risks. Some have panned out, most have not, but that's okay. I learned from each and every risk I took. I learned something new, and that's something that I could use as a tool to better my life for my future. What you set your mind to, you can at least try. Like I just said, you'll learn anyway. And the more you learn, the more tools you have to succeed. So potentially you will succeed, and you will succeed at what you put your mind to. So for everybody out there listening, you can do it. I'm cheering you on. Like, we've been talking about shame for the most part, and not so much about guilt, which honestly right now I can't think too much of what to say on the matter. Um, Guilt to me is self-explanatory now. And again, it's thanks to me going to therapy. Guilt is feeling bad for what you've done, what you said, feeling bad for your actions that were wrong. Let's be clear. If you made a mistake, if you did something wrong that affected somebody else, that's guilt. And the only way to get rid of that guilt is to hold yourself accountable for your actions, for what you did, like we spoke earlier. And yeah, you can seek forgiveness. You can try to seek forgiveness. Not everybody is going to forgive you, so don't expect to be forgiven for whatever reason. They have their own motives for not forgiving you, but you don't have to um, seek that validation, because when you seek forgiveness to a certain extent, and this is what's called selfish guilt, what I call selfish guilt. When you seek forgiveness, you seek validation to make yourself feel better, not to make the other person feel better. So, if you're seeking for forgiveness, don't expect to be forgiven. Not everybody's going to, and not everybody has to forgive you. But if you can forgive yourself afterwards, that's what matters. You don't have to feel guilty about it. And also, don't adopt repetitive behavior, because people will notice this and you will normalize that repetitive behavior to the point where you won't be able to acknowledge that what you're doing is wrong and it's affecting other people. When this repetitive behavior is noticed by others and it's being brought up to you, you're going to defend yourself. You're going to go into the defensive shell, and it causes a lot of rage at times. But everybody reacts differently. It's not always anger. It could be sadness. You could go into that repetitive behavior. If you don't acknowledge it, it could turn into a type of what could I describe it as? Well, it can turn into an anxiety, for example, but it could also turn into this type of shroud that you carry around, and it makes other people uncomfortable, and people won't want to be with you. And the more you notice that people don't want to be with you, the more bad you'll feel about yourself. So watch out for that and do the inner work. I can't repeat this enough. Do the inner work. Some people call it child work. Some people call it shadow work. Some people call it healing, just healing. Whatever the terminology that you have, do it. Don't wait for somebody else to help you, because at the end, you're the only one that can heal yourself. If you do have somebody else that tries to help you and guide you, that's great. But when you don't acknowledge that you are making the same mistakes and it's become normalized, you're stuck. You're the only person that can help yourself. You have to pull yourself out of that. And I said this earlier as well, that you have to validate the other person's feelings when it comes to guilt. You have to acknowledge what you did, how you affected them, and in what manner. If you don't acknowledge those things, you may still feel guilty. You have to acknowledge them and accept them, because you did make those choices. You did take those actions. You can't take them back. So acknowledge them for yourself. Accept that you made mistakes. but never forget the other person. Validate the other person. Otherwise, you won't truly forgive yourself, and you can carry that guilt for a long time. I know that I carried guilt um, for a very long time, and it still affects me, to be honest. Like, ever since I told my dad that I'm non-binary, um, I felt like I could be more myself. I started uh, painting my nails, and eventually I started feeling more comfortable with buying feminine clothing, makeup, all the girly stuff that I find fascinating and I like so much. Um, so my guilt that I carry is the fact that I don't give a fuck what anybody else has to say, what anybody in this town has to say. If they look at me with makeup or feminine clothing, I just don't care. And I've had the luck that people have actually complimented me for dressing the way I do, for um, doing my makeup, and those compliments have come from uh, females and males, men and women, straight, gay, bi, whatever. They've those compliments have come from all over the place. But, and it's a big but, um, the reason I feel guilty is because even though I don't care what everybody else thinks, I know my dad does. Um, my dad cares, and it's mostly out of overprotection. He fears that maybe something's gonna happen to me because I dress the way I do, and he he's just very overprotective. He doesn't like me going out the way I like dressing. So I actually don't do it as much. I'm at home most of the time anyway. But when I go out, I don't dress up. So it's a guilt that piles on. Uh, I feel bad for the fact that I don't allow myself to dress up the way I want to, because I feel bad that people might be pointing fingers at my dad. I don't care if they point fingers at me, but say something wrong about my dad. That's crossing the line. So that's where that guilt comes from. But I also know it's something that I can't control. And this is something that I learned in therapy as well. Make a list of what you can control and what you can. Can you control time? Well, if you know how, congratulations. But most people don't know how to stop time. So therefore you can't control it. Time continues to flow, time continues to go on. Whether it's with you or without you, it's gonna continue. That's something you can't control. Can you control what you do during that time? Yes, absolutely. So when I do my list, it's what can I control? I can control how I dress up. I can control how I put myself out there in front of people. I can control my own actions, and not caring, I could control that as well. I don't care. What can I not control though? I can't control how other people might feel about me. I can't control how people may think what I am or what label they want to put me in. I can't control that. I can't control that someone's talking shit just because I dress the way I do. And I have to realize that I can't control that my dad's overprotective and he's always going to be that way. And I can't control that other people might talk about him or me. I can't control it. Now, if there was a circumstance where I overhear someone saying something about my dad because of me and the way I dress up, the way I am, I would confront those people. And I don't mean it in a combative way, just like, hey, you're talking about my dad. You have no right to talk bad about somebody else when you don't know the situation that they're living in. And you shouldn't perceive a person as one thing or as an enabler or whatever when you yourself decide to divide other people like that. If somebody is able to accept me for who I am and how I am, that's all I need. And that's all I hope for with my dad. I know that the perspective of other people in the public affect him, but I have to realize I can't control that. So I have to be more myself. And if you know me, hey, give me that boost I need. Invite me to go somewhere and I'll get dressed up. I'll get dolled up. We can be baddies, go somewhere. I don't care where it is. Hell, it could be to fucking Walmart, and I don't care as long as I'm going out. Maybe I just need that boost, excuse me, that boost of confidence. Maybe that's all I need, and I do find confidence within myself, but it helps sometimes to know that other people can give you that confidence as well. So when it comes to guilt and shame, what you should do, the best thing you can do, is flip the narrative, change the narrative in your mind, and reevaluate yourself, evaluate the source of that shame, of that guilt, and resolve it. Anything can be resolved within yourself. If you resolve it in the physical world, that's an extra step that may or may not be necessary. But it's worth um, trying to take that step. But I feel like we've covered the basic of shame and guilt. Now I want to go into childhood trauma, even though I touched on it a little bit, and generational trauma. I think since I touched the topic a little bit earlier, I'll I'll talk about generational trauma and how it affects future generations. Now, generational trauma can be caused and is the root of many social and social and cultural events, such as war, murder, crimes, um, segregation, discrimination. I can't think of another Asian. But generational trauma comes from way back, and with each generation, we unlearn a little bit of that trauma and we change our behavior to better our future, which is the next generation. So I've noticed that this generation that is coming in has a lot more empathy than previous generations, even my generation, ever did as kids. Like, I see a lot more empathy. And when I say as kids, I am talking about like ages 6 and up. Because, at least from what I've observed, uh, and the people that I've met that have kids, I don't have kids. But the people that I met with kids, the kids that are 3 to 5 years old, they have empathy, but it gets diluted along the way. By the time that you're 6, you're exposed to other kids, therefore, you're exposed to other perspectives, and you adopt those perspectives as well, so that empathy kind of gets diluted by perspectives from different families, and it kind of joins in to the kid. The kid adopts it all. And afterwards, when they're growing up, 6 and up, they start focusing at home. They don't focus on what the other kids' beliefs are or whatever. Um, but they do focus at home, what they've been through, what they go through, and in their development, it changes and fluctuates a lot. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does. But I have met kids that their family members have negative views on certain groups of people or individual people, and I've seen these kids that are not afraid to voice their opinion and say, hey, what you're saying is wrong. And I have seen them go into these long speeches of why it's wrong. And I feel this joy that these kids are growing to be more empathic than previous generations. I actually had an interaction with a kid once that called me he, she, which I don't mind. My pronouns, I don't care for them. You can call me he, you can call me she. I don't care. And I asked this kid, why do you call me he, she? I was genuinely curious. Maybe they were confused. But I've actually learned that kids are more accepting in general of everybody. And, well, their response was, it's because my family calls you he, she. But I know it's wrong. And they went on to tell me that they only called me that because they heard it from their family. But they said it doesn't matter if you're he or she, it just matters what you feel inside. And I was surprised of how wise this kid was being in that moment. And to me, it proves that we have slowly, generation after generation, broken down these traumas and tried to do better, tried to teach better from what we were taught. And I know parents have a tough job because they have kids, they don't know how to raise a kid, and they only have the tools that they were given. If your parents were mistreated, you might end up being mistreated. That's what generational trauma is. You treat others the way you're treated, and you teach others the way you were taught. Me, I had to learn a lot. And actually, when I started learning was when my mom left the house. She went on about her life, and I stayed with my dad. I was not allowed to watch English language shows at home. Um, Even though my mom understands English and she speaks it, I was not allowed to watch shows, and that was her rule. It wasn't my dad's, it was her rule. But when she left, I started watching shows like Golden Girls, Charmed. I remember staying up at night and watching those shows and seeing the family dynamic and how empathic one can be. And even though you have family struggles, you can overcome them by having the correct communication. And in the past, you didn't have communication. You did what you were told to do, and you thought what you were told to think. And it all comes from, like I said, segregation, discrimination, wars. Like, sometimes we forget our history and we forget how tough our ancestors had it. And because they had these tough times, they had to develop a hard shell and be tough. And it was necessary at the time to overcome those obstacles that they were living. But as time went by, we started progressing as a society. And the more we progress as a society, the more accepting we can be and the less hard we have to be. So our shell kind of diminishes generation after generation. And as an individual, we learn to not have that shell all the time. We learn when to turn it on and when to turn it off. I know I have. I've learned when to turn it on and when to turn it off. But it wasn't because I learned it from my parents. It was because I learned watching shows and going to other people's houses and seeing their family dynamic. And I learned through observation. So, in reality, thanks to all of that, I taught myself. And when I would voice an opinion at home, it was seen as weird or crazy. But really, it was like, I don't know why it seems like a crazy thought, a crazy opinion, when it's just being accepting, being loving, because that's our true nature as human beings, is love, not hate. Hate is learned. Hate divides. Love unites. And if people were more aware of that, we would accept each other as a community. One community, not separate communities. And I do believe that this is what the newer generations are going to bring to the table, is unity. They're going to be stronger together. And at some point, that generational trauma won't be needed as a defense mechanism anymore. But I wanted to touch on generational trauma just a little bit. For now, I think that I'll talk about it more later on, both generational trauma and childhood trauma. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go into a rabbit hole, and this is gonna be a long episode, so I'd rather not do that. So, enough of all that. I hope you enjoy my podcast, and you can resonate with it. But as always, if you have questions, if you have comments, of course comment and hit the subscription button, the notification button. And if you want advice, my email's in my about section. But you can reach me at inbalancingthespectrum.podcast@gmail.com or through my Instagram, which is imbalancingthespectrum.pod. For now, enjoy yourselves. I hope all of you are doing well. And if you're going through something, self-evaluate first. Analyze what you're going through. And learn to love yourself. Accept yourself. Don't define yourself as others see you. Always love yourself. You'll end up loving everybody else as well. So, until next time,